and also to keep in mind how sustainable our way forward is. What is the carbon footprint? What is the environmental impact of it? And how do we make sure that we sort of stitch in all the other overlapping fields? A number of our speakers have spoken about how Pakistan needs to increase its exports. But in the last 10 years, 15 years, a repeatedly, reported problem has been how the manufacturers have had an energy deficit. This shortage has really costed Pakistan. So what will be the way forward? Ladies and gentlemen, may I welcome my very insightful, very pertinent panel for this conversation. Please welcome our moderator for this conversation, Mr. Aftab Mohammed Butt. You are the CEO of Capco. Aftab Saab will be leading this very insightful panel, and of course all the major players and key players in the Pakistan energy sector are also represented on this panel. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming the Chief Executive of K Electric Limited, Syed Munis Abdullah Alvi. Next up, please welcome Professor Dr. Fayaz Chaudhry. You are the Professor and Director at LUMS Energy Institute and the Program Director at the Power Sector Center of Excellence, and also the CEO of Engineers Guild Private Limited. Next up, please welcome the CEO of Lucky Electric Power Company, Mr. Ruhail Mohammed. Please also welcome the CEO of Engro Energy Limited, Ehsan Zafar Said. Let's also welcome our moderator of the past session, but a speaker in this one. Please welcome the founder and CEO of Planative, Ayla Majid. Aftab Saab, over to you. This panel discussion is themed at fixing Pakistan's power sector, the way forward. And right about the last 5 minutes, the timer will play for your perusal.
All right, thank you very much. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum, everyone, ladies and gentlemen. पावर सेक्टर का भी बहुत बड़ा चैलेंज है कि वो फिक्स नहीं हो सका, और हमें एक और चैलेंज मिल गया कि हमारा टाइम स्क्वीज हो के 40 मिनट्स हो गया. So we'll be going to be very brief on it. Just to give a little bit of background what we have. Pakistan went through a lot of problem in terms of energy. I'll use the word energy because that also includes the gas side. In particular power sector, and in terms, once we had 65% share of hydro and 35% rest, now the equation has switched over. At this point of time, you remember in around 2012, we used to have a shortfall of about 10,000 megawatt and load shedding of 10 to 12 hours. And now we are sitting in a situation where we have kind of surplus, and we are trying to find areas where we can sell the electricity. Having said that, that's the situation right now. I have, just to give a background, a proper ground for my panelists, very able to, which I'm going to introduce, a little bit of the numbers which we are right now and in next 5 years. And that will give you some ideas that what are we going to face in the next 5 years. I was very particular about the title of this conference, and my intent that it should not just be the discussion, but we should also be able to find 1, 2, 3 in terms of our understanding, the solution that the sector or the decision maker should take to resolve the issue. And before I give you 4 or 5 slides, I'd like to introduce Munis Saab, and you have already done it. I think I should skip on this. You can see the title, and this is the first one. Gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen, I'm just going to quickly run through it. We have 4,777 megawatts, and Munis will definitely going to speak about it. 35,000, roughly 36,000 megawatt in the rest of the system, dependable capacity 33,000, 31 million users, 10 discos, 123. The important point that you should keep in mind for now discussion and later, that the average tariff is 18, which NEPRA have determined, and the average consumer is 17, and so there's an inbuilt shortfall in the tariff and the recovery. And this is beside the line losses and the non-recoverability of the system. This is this information I obtained from the system, so roughly it's accurate. You would see this is the generation mix that we have, and if you look at the bottom line, we have generated 130,000 gigawatt in the last year, and the average EPP, energy purchase price, which is the true manufacturing, that is 5.2, whereas the capacity payment, which we normally understand is a fixed payment that has to be paid in any case, is 6.1. The average cost was 6.33. This is the main area of bleeding. These are, apart from the Karachi Electric, these are the distribution companies which we normally call discos. You would see that overall they bought 121 million gigawatts of hour, and they were able to sell 99. That means 21.745 is the lost number of units which could have generated revenue. And for these units, you have to still pay. The percentages of losses, actual losses, you would see 21,000, 17.9. And the most important, which probably one of the most important cause of the stuck-up money in the circular debt, the total receivable from these by the distribution companies, 1.2 trillion. Here our money is stuck. If that is recovered, our system would be in much better situation. We would be liquid, and they would have a positive reflection on the cost of generation. And future, this is what we're going to face, and I'm going to speak to my panelists on it. You look at that, we were talking about the capacity payment. In 2030, the capacity payment would increase to 2.4 billion. Remind you, this payment has to be made irrespective you are generating or not. And the anticipated EPP is 764. I'll speak about it, why this is important, later on. This is the capacity payment, future outlook, how our unit going to be expensive more in the future. So future, we have to address right now. And this is thanks. This is just to give sort of a ground for our panelists to discussion. I have my very dear friend and my Peti Bhai, Monis, with me, and I am particularly very great fan, not just because he's sitting, but the way the guys are handling Karachi Electric and the innovation and the other investment part they are doing. I request Monis, Kay is always in the news, and I personally know that you guys are doing a lot of stuff. Can you give us a quick rundown that how you have achieved in good part that you have are at present, and for 5-10 years for the customers, how you're going to change, evolve, or improve for the benefit of the end customers?
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Thank you, Aftab, for the nice introduction. And at the same time, I would really like to congratulate Aswar Ehsan Saab, who now has an added advantage of being the State Minister for Investment. But I am sure if he would have not been the BOI Chairman or Minister, the traction that he has created would still be the same. So I think it's a fantastic effort and important for all of us to sit, debate, and talk about how to take things forward in this challenging environment. Again, coming back to K Electric, and one thing which we have tried to explain to people, and again with utmost respect, the K in K Electric is not Karachi. It is kinetic. And the the main reason of not having it as Karachi is that because we are not only restricted to Karachi, we are in Uthal, Bindar, Bela, and we are up to Gharo. And there is a conversation happening to take that network even beyond Uthar, Bela, in deep into Balochistan, because it is not too cost effective for the Quetta Electric to extend its network close to this. So probably, maybe at some point in time, that area can also increase. So again, K is not for Karachi, it's for kinetic.
Useful.
So the journey, and I think so many people in this room are aware of the challenges, and we have repeated it again and again, and we don't want to do it again. But I think the future, in my opinion, and I'll still say it, it is privatization of the distribution companies. Yes, there are problems. We have seen the numbers. We know that there's going to be excess capacity. We know that there's going to be amount which have to be paid. But at the end of the day, if the distribution system is not in a position to transport those electrons which are available and sell it or distribute it and record those units in line with what has been prescribed by the regulator, and then collect to the extent it is allowed to them, you probably would know the cost of power generation. Today, if you look at discos, including K Electric, the tariff asks for 100% recovery ratio almost, which is impossible. So there are a lot of costs which are going into the circular debt, which is again a huge elephant in the room, which has to be resolved. I think what the government is trying to do, and again the future 5 years or 7 years, is dependent on the CTBCM, and I'm sure my colleagues in this panel will talk about it, the integrated generation plan, efficiency plan. I think these documents were not there initially, and you know this much better than I am, is that these documents are there. You can look at it, you can comment on it, you can say that CTBCM has these challenges, but now at least you have the opportunity to comment on it and improve it. It might take a bit longer, it might not be implemented in the manner it is presented today, but I think the future is deregulation. The future is, and we have tried this, and if I have the opportunity, I'll talk again in the second question or later, that digitization is a very important thing which everyone has to do. And KE has done tremendous. You can see our app, and we are trying to take it to the next level where you would know if there is a fault, where is the car which is going to fix that fault, how much time will it take. It will require a lot of tracking of things, which we are still doing. But if you look at the other discourse, let me tell you, and I'm sure you guys must have seen the NAPRA reports, they're saying it's virtually manual. The numbers are not too much generated from the systems, and it is very important that you have those systems to be implemented. It will require money, it will require people. So while we claim that privatization is the solution, but is it possible with all these manual things? So I think digitization, circular debt, handling of circular debt, planning. The reason why we have excess capacity, one can say that you added power without looking at the future. One can debate that the plants were, or the plan was okay, but the growth did not come. But fine, now we have the opportunity to predict the future and come up with plans so that we should not be in a position to do the same what we did in our previous power policies. The renewables is a reality. I think this is being done, and the government has an aggressive policy. K Electric itself, we inshallah in the next 5 to 7 years we would have at least 20 to 25% power generated from renewables. It is going to reduce the cost. It is going to reduce the import impact. And again, this is going to help us reduce the carbon emissions, which again is, we as a nation, probably we are okay, but as a country, probably you need to help the nature to help you. So these are the few things which, we would like to do as K Electric also, and would like to see from the government policy perspective also.
Thank you very much. I think you rightly mentioned and referred to a structural approach towards the betterment of any sector, in particular the power sector. And you rightly mentioned that now we have documents relating to CTBCM and IGSAP Integrated Generation Plan. And we have the privilege to have Dr. Saab with us, who has worked in the system and who could be considered one of the pioneers to develop a structural approach towards the generation and transmission and the distribution system. Dr. Saab, may I request, I think this Monis Saab referred to the very relevant point. We were having a discussion that, the fact of the matter is now we have what we have for the right or wrong reason, and we are looking into the future. So may I request, how do you look into the planning thing and how we should look into the future addressing these constraints now?
Yeah, thank you, Bhatt. Actually, when we talk about fixing power sector, unless and until we look at the overall structure of the power sector, how it is governed, what are the elements that we are trying to govern, those things have to be looked at. So we mentioned a few numbers in the slides, and then we spoke about that we will need to fix discos for sure. So they incur quite a few losses, more than they should. But the major flaw that we have been living with, we have not been making informed decisions. So that is what my focus is, that we need to create an environment where we start making informed decisions. What do I mean by informed decisions? That we had the skill and the capability in 80s as well as 90s to develop an integrated system and resource plan, which was missing for the last 20-odd years, and now we started making it again. But still, we lack the capacity in the sector which can develop that plan professionally and equitably. So, that, at LUMS, we have started that effort of capacity building of power sectors. So nowadays, quite a few, advanced technical training courses are being held at LUMS especially for, the state-owned entities. And later on, we will invite the private sector also, IPPs, to learn some of the decision-making process that the industry requires. And I will start with the regulator. What do we, are we, regulating this power sector correctly? If you would have been doing it, we wouldn't have been in this circular debt situation. And we need to understand that this DISCO is one portion. Overall, maybe 100 billion rupees are lost. Total loss is about 150, and you cannot avoid some of the technical losses. Maybe 100 billion is lost in the recovery or in the extra losses. But we need to be mindful that we supplied last year, or 4 years ago, same sort of energy. We just looked at the number 130 terawatt hours, and we supplied 122, 122, and 122 in the last 4 years. But our capacity payment grew from 400 to 1,000 billion. So 600 billion rupees were added into the capacity payment for the supply of same energy. So what does this mean? So what is adding to the circular debt? Is it only the losses, or 500 billion extra added, which we didn't, plan it well? So the focus should be that we need to follow processes. ये जो सवाबदीदी इख्तियारात हमने आदत डाल ली है इस मुल्क में, we need to get away from that सवाबदीदी इख्तियारात. We need to follow a process. And we need to make ourselves process bound. So there is a process of a grid code, it has been there forever, but we never followed it. That's why for 10, 12 years we were in deficit, now we are in surplus. So going forward, the recommendation is follow the process. And whoever violates that process, hang him. Simple. So, otherwise, you just look at how many people suffer. So, the 230 million people are suffering because of the higher cost of electricity, and the industry is, affected. So, whatever process we have processes for integrated in the grid code, integrated system plan, but then how to get out of this? Ease of doing business. Our base load even today sits at 8,000 megawatt, which was for last 7 years, it was 7,000. Just last year and this year, it has increased a bit. And our peak demand is 25, 26 only on the NTDC system. If you include 3,500 or almost 4,000 megawatt of K-electric, so our peak demand is 29 or 30,000 megawatt, and your base load is for the whole country is not even 10,000. So what is this disparity? So it means whatever we will build, our overall capacity factor, utilization factor is very low. And when I was, I joined, WAPDA in 85, our industrial demand was 40% of the mix. And now it is only 22. So what does that mean? So it means at load end, we need to increase our load. Only then we can get out of this circular debt. So our focus has to be, so connect everybody, whoever, yes, recovery is important, but giving connections, timely connections. And the industry is longing for, now there is a good environment that industry has, I see that a lot of investment is coming. But the thing is, are we making their life easy? Are we making their supply reliable? So those are the focus points for future that we need to, like electrical vehicles and induction heating, we lose our gas, which is already scarce, just 15 to 20% efficiency in cooking. But the thing is, we have 62% efficiency power plant sitting there, and we are not operating it. For God's sake, when are we going to learn? And this disparity between the peak load and the base load, what is that load? Have we gone to vacation in these 4 months? No. So we have not gone to vacation, but for this 14 to 15,000 megawatt of, which is a cooling load, air conditioning, fan and all that, how much, did we even, look at what our building designs are? Are they energy efficient? So those are the focus areas. Instead of keep adding, additional generation, we need to look at things in totality. So anyway, excellent. So I'll have my chance.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Yeah. Dr. made excellent points, and let me confess that we have the opportunity to discuss these things. And he mentioned about the peak demand and the lowest demand or base demand. Yes, Pakistan is one of the very few countries where peak demand and the base load or the lowest, the point has a greatest disparity. Normally, average is 25% from peak and the lowest points, or you say the average system utilization. Unfortunately, Pakistan has this problem, and therefore, when we have a problem of electricity shortfall, we suffer the most. Yes, in, for example, transitionary time when you are moving from summer to winter to summer, the heating and the cooling load gets down, and then you have less demand. So good point Dr. Sab made. I think we will discuss it further. Rohel, one of my very good friend. I mean, circular debt, such a big name, and I think in Pakistan, you ask anybody and whether he can read or write, you would know the circular debt. You have worked and you have been involved in implementation of a lot of very good project and very good team. I would like to ask you the circular debt, which is no more circular now, but having said that, the amount is increasing like anything. And every second year or year, we are sitting in front of the Ministry of Finance and Power asking for the money for the bills that, for the electricity which has been sold like 2 years back. So would you like to sort of throw a light and a solution, if you can, please?
Thank you, Aftab. Assalamu alaikum. So for those who are not familiar, circular debt arises when the total receipts and payments between the entire power sector don't match. It's as simple as that. So if you are recovering, say, 100 rupees and you have to pay 120 rupees, the 20 rupees gets added on to the overall circular debt. So the main body which is doing this is the CPPA, which is the Central Power Purchasing Agency, which collects money through the DISCOs from the customers, direct consumers. It gets money from the subsidy from the Ministry of Finance as well, and then has to pay all the power producers plus, capital expenditure to maintain the system, overheads, etc. So this, where is this circular debt parked? It's parked in government entities, it's parked in power plants, it's parked in fuel suppliers like PSO, OGDC, SNGPL. So what's the quantum? The quantum, as you said, is about 2.5 trillion rupees right now, and has increased from 1.2 when this government came in. So you're adding about 400 billion a year in this entire system. Now, there are many reasons for it. Some are direct, some are indirect. Some have already been touched upon, so I'll just quickly go through them and start talking about solutions as well. So the first one which we talked about is the DISCO inefficiencies. So NEPRA allows certain losses or non-recoveries, but in actuality, these are substantially more. So for example, NEPRA allows about 13.5–14% on T&D, which is another name for theft, but the actual number is 18. NEPRA says zero losses as far as recovery is concerned, and the average is around 10% for the country. They're collecting 90 out of 100. So if you add these two versus the NEPRA benchmark, we're looking at about 200 billion rupees a year. Now, this can't be achieved immediately, but as Moniz was mentioning, privatization is probably one of the solutions. You call it whatever, you call it management contracts, call it privatization, but it has to go out of public sector control for it to happen. And also it won't happen overnight. I mean, for example, K Electric took 15 years to go from 36 to, I think, 15, 16. So it's a 5–7 year type of target that slowly, Bangladesh, by the way, has gone from like 36 to 11 in about 20 years. So these are the things that need to be done as far as, so privatization, management contracts, that's number one. Number two is that we talked about capacity payments, right? Now, what happened 5–7 years ago when there was load shedding, two things. One is that the utilization of those power plants, because the capacity was so low, was very high. So in the summer, your demand is 25, you're only generating 18, and there's so much load shedding. Plus, at those times, the debt servicing was complete, so there was no debt servicing component on that capacity payment. Today, because we have so much capacity, like 35,000, your peak demand is 26, average is about 20–22. For each unit of capacity, it's being doubled because being loaded on to 2 units as such. And on top of that, all our brand new plants, especially the CPEC and the 2015 plants. So there's heavy debt servicing, especially in dollar terms with deval. So this problem will remain. It's almost $1 trillion, and as Aftab said, that it will go on to $2 trillion as well. There are 2 or 3 solutions to this. One is, of course, as Dr. Saab mentioned, is the demand. And demand comes from many ways. One is like for just to the heating demand in the winters. So example, SNGPL, the demand just for heating alone is like 800 million standard cubic feet per day. Now, if you can theoretically convert that into electrical heating, that's the amount of gas you will save also, and that much more, maybe 4,000 megawatts will get utilized. Similarly, to move captive power plants onto the grid, obviously one is a pricing incentive, but the other one is quality, which I think the DISCOs have to step up, including K Electric, and provide sustainable, reliable power, and only then they will shift into grid power as such. The third element is, of course, putting the grid where there are 25% unserved customers out here. So the one way is to electrify and let the natural demand grow as well. So for this captive, for these capacity payments, I think there are these three for the winter load, the captive, and natural growth. I think these are the solutions for utilizing the capacity payments as such. There are other reasons also. For example, there is a certain amount of subsidy which the government wants you to give to either the lifeline consumers or the tube wells or somewhere in Balochistan, but they don't fully budget for it, and even if they do, it's not paid timely. So that keeps on adding on to the system as well. Similarly, NEPRA, there's a NEPRA role with any adjustment in price has to be notified immediately, but they take the sweet time. By the time it is notified, there's a 6-month gap on actual cost versus the recovery. So that keeps on adding. So NEPRA has to play its due role, the ministry has to play its due role to do that. Another big number which is there is the interest on the old amount. So this 2.5 trillion, the interest is part of the loading up in the power tariff as such. I think once the flow of circular debt stops, I think then the Ministry of Finance will have confidence that the problem has been resolved. So the back stock can then be taken up at the budget level. So maybe if we are running 3 trillion rupees a year deficits, maybe $1 trillion each in 2 years can be taken up by the federal government. The interest alone on those 2 trillion will be 200 billion, and then you can balance your flow. I think the final point I have is in terms of the distribution network, because in certain Punjab areas, we have the power, but we don't have the distribution network, and you're seeing load shedding there. So once we resolve that, a lot more power can be taken up there, and we can stop running RFO plants which are inefficient. I think I'll stop there.
Thank you very much. And I think you very rightly addressed one of my own concern, being the finance guy, that there is an unproductive add-on into the tariff. And if you just charge 10% on 2 trillion, is 200 billion, which is added into the tariff. Whether it's added and transferred to the consumer or not, somebody has to bear this cost, which is non-productive. It's a past event that you have to carry on. And government has to seriously think about it to structure or adjust it somewhere. Otherwise, it'll keep adding. It's an elephant in the room, which will remain so. So thank you very much, Rohil. And Ehsan sir, you and your organization has been involved into many innovative ideas, and you guys have entered into the coal generation as well, and you guys are into the gas side as well. So what would be your idea of liberalization and improving the power sector overall?
Thank you, Bhatt Saab, and first of all, thank you, Asfar Hassan, for inviting me to this forum. Bhatt Saab, for liberalization, I think I must first define what the problem is. The problem that we are facing in the entire power value chain, if you divide the power value chain, it has around 7 big components to it, starting from fuel, then generation, transmission, distribution, demand, cost, and others. In each of this component, there is an issue. So you can list down a number of issues, but you have to force rank them. What is the biggest issue and what needs to be resolved? Rohil just elaborated on the biggest issue, which is related to distribution. And in this particular item, distribution, the issue is of circular debt, which is 60%, 55 to 60% of disco losses are contributing towards circular debt. But after that, what is the issue? The second issue is the surplus power. And the surplus power issue is coming from lack of planning or lack of having an independent planning body. And then comes the demand issue and the cost issue. And it's a chicken and egg situation, whether the demand is low because of the high cost or the cost is high because of lack of demand. So the question that you have asked about liberalization actually addresses this. First, we need to address the disco issues or the efficiency losses of the discos. But the second thing is we need to understand that up till now, the government is relying on a single buyer model. Single buyer model, a monopolistic market, the whole risk is with the government. Government has made many attempts. Several of them have been failed attempts, and recently a lot of attempts were made, and there have been some results, some benefits coming out of it, like the winter package, the industrial package, and things of that sort. But in spite of making all these efforts, the issues are not going away. So we need to see where the world is going. What is the global trend, or what is the trend in comparable markets? And the trend is to move away from a monopolistic single buyer market to a multiple buyer and a multiple seller market, moving away towards liberalization, moving towards a free market. And once this happens, once the free market happens, the market forces adjust themselves, and then you'll have competition, you'll have efficiency, and therefore the cost will come down and the reliability will come in. Very recently, our company has embarked upon MOU with Government of Sindh, where we have said that, look, government has set two big statements as part of their vision. One is renewables, making renewables, taking it to 30% by 2030 or taking it to 60% as a clean energy target. So that's one objective the government has defined, and the second objective they have defined is to move towards opening up market. And CTBCM that we just heard, is part of it. So we have signed an MOU with Government of Sindh, which takes care of both these problems. We are using the cluster of industries at Port Qasim, and we are using resources at Jhampir and connecting both of them through a dedicated transmission line. And by doing this, perhaps both of the issues will be resolved. So what I want to say is that, in my opinion, the way to go is resolve disco issues, open up the market. Everyone is prepared for it. The regulator itself is talking about it. Chairman Napra has said this on record many times, that they want to open up the market, and CTBCM is just round the corner and it's knocking on the door. It's a realization which is going to happen. The recent result of ISCO extension in license is writing on the wall, so which means that the market is going to open up, if not in April, maybe after a couple of months. So it's just 6 months away. So CTBCM is coming, power sector is geared up, government is talking about it. Something has to do proof of concept. Somebody has to come forward and take baby steps, and what we are suggesting is to get into bilateral contracts with BPC, bulk power consumers, and so that the price comes down. So my message to you, Bhatt Saab, would be that we must try, and we must not shy away, and we must open up this market as much as possible and go towards liberalization.
Thank you, Ahmed. A very pertinent point. I'll quickly to you, I know that your renewable energy efficiency is very close to your heart. Just forget about the few minutes, and you have the time to speak about it. You sit on CPPA board. So give us a fresh look, because we are sitting in the power sector. And my attitude is somebody also should tell us that what to do, actually, as a user as well.
Sure, Aftab, thank you so much. I'll be very quick, but not brief. So I think the important thing to look at is that when we talk about power sector, if we just keep on finding the solution within the sector, it's going to be a challenge. Let's take the helicopter view, what the Air Chief said in the morning. Let's sort of step out, zoom out, and see what is that we need to do. When we look at things in a holistic manner and look at that, what is the need, what is the growth of all the other sector, be it automotives, be it agriculture, be it technology, etc. In all that context, we need to find a solution. Understanding the problem, I think it's a very good thing, as long as we recognize that all these problems exist and agreeing with all the solutions out there, there are some additional things that need to be done. I think talking about renewables, why it makes sense. We should not shy away from investing more in renewables thinking that we have overcapacity. Overcapacity can also be fixed when we can really drive the growth in the demand. How do we do that? Agriculture sector is there, the technology sector is there. Again, when we look at electric vehicles, IEA says that by 2030 there will be about 230 million cars, EVs on the roads. Likewise, the kind of demand that we have, we are an agriculture country. We waste more than probably close to 30 or 40% of our agri-produce because we don't have the right kind of supply chain. We can use our energy over there as well. And now talking about green energy, why it makes sense. Again, I believe in the principle of that we need to take a stakeholder approach. Whatever capacity was involved, whatever system inefficiencies were there, let's for a moment assume that everything was done with good intention. And since this is a future summit, let's move forward and look at that. Going forward, what is that we need to do? We need to agree on the principle that the consumer needs sustainable, reliable, affordable energy. And at the same time, let's add more renewable in the grid and also off-grid. In the last 3 decades, I know there's a lot of debate with regards to the base load, etc., etc. But when we look at the battery storage costs, in the last 3 decades, the battery storage costs have come down by 97%. And the next decade's projection is that it's going to come down by further probably 60%. It just makes sense to go there. When we talk about installing more renewables, now utilities scale photovoltaics and in the wind energy, and all these experts, they know more than myself that now even without sustainable financial support, these projects and these technologies, they have become competitive to other fossil fuel projects. So I think we need to sort of look at things from the holistic perspective. I would nevertheless just highlight one number, which when I looked at it was very alarming to me. In the last few years, there were coal plants that were installed, and about, I think, more than half of the capacity was installed based on imported fuel, imported coal. Now with the global commodity pricing going up, and I think Goldman Sachs has sort of also come up with an indicator that we are not far from, unfortunately, 3-digit oil price. That is scary. Last year's coal price import bill was over $1.2 billion, and in the morning we spent good enough time understanding the current deficit. So I think those are sort of very important things to sort of understand. And also, again, bringing in another holistic view. IRENA's report says that $1 of investment in renewable energy saves about $3 to $7 in healthcare. We are all going through, and I don't know for how long we sort of go through this pandemic and the impact of climate change. So I would say we need to sort of re-collaborate ourselves. We need to see that, okay, how do we sort of move out of this situation of inertia and look at solving the energy sector, power sector problem with an external sort of intervention as well. And I think it's so important to respect every stakeholder, whether it is an investor, whether it is the consumer, anyone who's part of a contract. And I think only by that way we can sort of move forward in the right direction. All the tools, they can be made available. I talked in the previous session about the $130 trillion climate finance, and it's that kind of finance that is committed to SDGs. When I think about power sector, I'll just end with one of my thoughts, that I often think of the South African Truth and Reconciliation Commission. It is very sort of detached from all of this problem. But in 1995, when South Africa set that up, that was to put all the stakeholders on the table and jointly find a solution. This is what we need to do with all good intention and only looking in the future going forward. So,
great.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Claps for Ayla. And just concluding it, because, guys, sorry we didn't have enough time. There are certain points which warranted more discussion, base load, and the reconciliation, because that topic is pretty controversial. But just to conclude, 1, 2, 3 points that we probably have to focus in the future. The fact is, the power that we have, we have. The first thing that we need to do is to sell the power. I told you, I have work on the both sides of the table. So unless we sell more power, be at marginal cost, or we have to convince the grid user at any price, there is no rescue in the future unless we sell the power. 2 is the structured approach, about 4 or 5 years to recover it. We have to address right now. I have shown you 2.4 trillion recovery. And we should not keep our eyes for passing for another years. We have to start addressing now so that we can do it. Renewable, yes. And thank you very much. I think you wish to say. Absolutely. That is the. And इसके साथ मैं ये भी ऐड करूँगा कि हर कोई अपने अपने हिस्से का काम करता चला जाए. ये इंतज़ार ना करे कि उसने किया या उसने नहीं किया. हमें सबको अपना रोल, अगर अपना अपना रोल करते रहेंगे तो इंशाल्लाह हम ये इस मैस से भी निकल आएंगे. Thank you very much, gentlemen.
Thank you very much. May I request all the gentlemen in the panel to please stay up on stage. Ladies and gentlemen, we've had some scary times, and just as we enter 2022 with this new renewed hope that yes, we'll fix our problems in the power sector, the last year ended with a somber note where we saw a startling energy crisis in Lebanon. While there were just a few days and help has arrived, but yes, the crisis was years in the making. I love the optimism that has been displayed by this panel. Yet there are reality checks around us. Ladies and gentlemen, let's move forward. Before we close this panel, we'd like to present this wonderful panel with a token of our appreciation. For this, once again, may I request Mr. Ali Akai, the chairman of Martin Dow Group, Air Chief Marshal Suhail Aman Sahab, who's the Chief Executive Strategic Engagements at the National Group, and Ms. Rabia Ahmed, the Director and Chief Operating Officer, Nutshell Group, to please join us up on stage. You've grown tired of all of us. You're not applauding our wonderful people who are coming on again. And to do the honors and present these books, may I request the CEO of Engro Polymer and Chemicals Limited, Mr. Jahangir Piracha, to please join us up on stage. Jahangir sir, bahut shukriya for being here. Ladies and gentlemen, the first book, we'd love to present this to Syed Munas Abdullah Alvi, the CEO of K Electric Limited. This was also news to me, by the way, that the K stands for kinetic. So congratulations and thank you for being here. Next up, ladies and gentlemen, we need the academia and, of course, the corporate sector to collaborate more closely and influence the policy. Please join me in presenting the next book to Professor Dr. Fayaz Chaudhry, the Professor and Director at the LUMS Energy Institute. Of course, ladies and gentlemen, we need more luck in this department. It's always good to have luck on our sides. Next up, presenting this token of appreciation to Mr. Ruhail Mohammed, the CEO of Lucky Electric Power Company. Next up, ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Mr. Ehsan Zafar Sayed, CEO of Engro Energy Limited. We'd love to present this as a token of our appreciation to you, sir. Trusted to bring in a fresh, vibrant outlook, and of course the future is female. Ladies and gentlemen, our speaker and panelist, founder and CEO of Planative, Ayla Majid. And last but definitely not the least, our honorable moderator for the panel, the CEO of Capco, Mr. Aftab Muhammad Bhatt. Thank you, gentlemen. Ladies, may I request you all to please come together for a group photograph before this session formally concludes. May I request you all to please come together for a picture. I am trusting our key photographer to choreograph this for us. Thank you, ladies. Thank you, gentlemen. That was our third session. And now, ladies and gentlemen, unpacking and diving right into the next one. Our fourth session is themed as Looking Ahead, Pakistan's path to the digital economy. And it puts two of our most favorite subjects together. Of course, digital inclusion, digital vibrancy, connectivity, and of course, how and why and in what way can it impact the economy. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a fantastic panel bringing this conversation to you as well. First up, may I take this opportunity of inviting our moderator for this conversation. Please welcome the Country Managing Director, Pakistan and Afghanistan for SAP, Mr. Saqib Ahmed. Next up, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the CEO, MD and the member of the board at the Systems Limited, Mr. Asif Peer. Please also join me in welcoming the Country Director, Pakistan for Acumen and a board member at the Bank Al Falah Limited. Please welcome Dr. Aisha K. Khan. Please also put your hands together to welcome the President and the CEO of NDC Tech, Amara Masood. And last but definitely not the least, please welcome the Managing Director of Daraz PK, Mr. Ehsan Saya. Ladies and gentlemen, this one is focused on the digital economy, which to most of us is a mystery. While we are all digitally connected, huddled on our cell phones, how economy and the digitization is shaping up is of key concern. Many believe that we have also leapfrogged in the last 3 years what seemed impossible, and people had hesitance and resistance. We have sort of fast forwarded into this age, and that's perhaps one of the only silver linings of COVID. But let's see what this conversation is going to unpack. So Saqib, over to you.
Thank you very much. I think it's an honor to be present with these ladies and gentlemen or guys over here who are leading the digital initiative overall. I think let's talk about a little bit about digital economy first. You know, how many of us are using cash anymore? how many of us are just doing the digital transactions? I think the use of wallet has gone into mobile wallet and e-wallet today. Everything that we are doing is adding a digital and e-part in our day-to-day lives. Going on to online shoppings, to do their transfers through the banks, through the online transactions, talking about the cryptocurrencies overall, and everything getting digital. That's what our lives have become. We are getting more easy because we have been provided all the interfaces and availability of all these digital interfaces to move forward on our lives on day-to-day basis. That's what we are becoming, and as we will move forward, and if we go to the developed countries, we are already going to the next level as we go along. And talking about it, first of all, and Asif, starting from you as you are on my left on that very front, the word digital economy, what does it mean for the people in Pakistan, and in the whole context of the global digital economy, where do we stand, and what should be the next steps for us?
It's fine? Ji, Assalamu alaikum everyone, good afternoon. Thanks to be part of this esteemed panel. Thank you, Asfar, for again hosting a great event. So I would like to say, what is, how do you see the digital? I think we hear digital transformation, digital economy, anything with E and D. This is, everybody is focused, right? But what it is, I think I would like to just, for common understanding, the simple word, when you talk about digital, you have to think about your customers, your partners, your vendors, how you can serve them through transformation of your business, how you can make your business a composable business architecture versus the traditional departmental architecture of your organization. So that's the simple, it's a simple definition, right? Anything we see today, digital, if you keep customers in mind, you will revolve and transform your solution, your products, your organization around that. And that is the first step. And then you ask the second question, do I optimize or transform? Should I optimize, and what is the difference between these two things? Once you optimize your businesses, it means you are looking at, like of course, operation excellence, seeing short-term profitability, and so on and so forth. When you really transform, we talk about how do I transform my business, right? Then you are talking about, in the digital economy, you're thinking that how can I disrupt this space? What is my organization place in this world? Where do I exist in my economy? What can I make a huge disruption that revolves my industry and my customers? Because then your mindset is focused on the customer side, and you think about long-term profitability and sustainability versus the short-term. So as Saqib asked, that where do we stand today, right? I think we, as Rob, I think Sidra just mentioned as well, yes, last few years and COVID as a silver lining, we have really improved as the country from a digitization perspective, from e-commerce perspective. Essen will, at the end, will of course shed the light that what they have seen, the robustness in the B2B and B2C space in e-commerce, where most of the people have started using the wallets and so on and so forth. So yes, things have improved, but are we there where we need to be? I think it's a long way, because right now is still, most of the organization in our country are thinking about optimization. How do I optimize and make the money today? Versus transforming the organization and looking at the holistic view and looking at the long-term vision, that how can you have a composable business architecture versus the traditional architecture. So I think this is my view. Of course, we have a lot of potential, and there are small businesses, large businesses out here as well. As per from the Forbes survey, what Forbes has identified, that 49% of the decision makers believe that technology will create the level playing field between the large and small organizations. So we have to start thinking technology as a competitive edge and differential advantage versus just as an expense side and thinking it differently, right? So that's once the country, and once especially the public sector of our country, when they think about the citizens and transform themselves, that how can we ease the life of our consumers and our citizen services, then the digital transformation will evolve and people will see it through and it will work. And it will create a lot of employment and so on and so forth. So the digital economy, it is very important. The private sector and the public sector transformation goes hand in hand, because that will create the infrastructure, that will create the robustness, that will create the jobs, that will change our country's, I would say, a digital future. Thank you.
Good, thank you. I think Asif brought a good point about optimization and transformation. And I think this is important for the companies as they are moving and starting their digital transformation journeys. It's important to make sure that how they are part of the digital economy, this should be at the forefront for them. Moving on over there, and both Aisha and Amara, first of all, I would like to welcome you to the most diversified panel of this show till now, because we have the maximum females on the stage. It has not happened since morning till then. Yeah. So Aisha, coming to you, and I think just talking about, since morning we have been talking about specifically Pakistan, its export, and we all understand that Pakistan is mainly an agricultural country. How do you see this agriculture part of that one and connecting it to the digital economy? How we can connect the two things, because that is the part that will help us in growing overall for the Pakistan in end-to-end prosperity that we are seeing today.
Sure, thank you for this. Can you hear me? Is this on?
Not much.
Can you hear?
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay. Well, so I may be biased here, but I don't think we can talk about a future without talking about agriculture and food systems. This is true all over the world. It is even more true in Pakistan. And so I'll take a minute to just sketch out what I'm talking about here. Now, we may be familiar with the numbers that 1/5 of our GDP comes from agriculture, so roughly $60 billion, but actually your entire economy is dependent on agriculture. Upstream, downstream, it connects to large-scale manufacturing, it connects to everything. So unless we can figure out how to solve for effective agriculture, value chains that make sense, I don't think we have, when we're talking about the future, we should be a little more worried. Now, where do we stand here? Unfortunately, in Pakistan, our contribution to agriculture over time has been going down. And through decades of underinvestment in our value chain, what we're left with is 90% of your farmers are very small farmers who are cultivating on less than 5 acres of land. And you'd ask why this is relevant. It's relevant because when you're a really small farmer, you unfortunately cannot access the different technologies that are available to actually optimize. So large-scale agriculture is no longer viable. You are under-investing. You do not have access to the highest quality seed. You're relying on traditional methods of production. And what that translates to finally for us, as an agrarian country, Saqib, what you mentioned, unfortunately, we're now in a situation where 90 million Pakistanis, and this is a huge number, are food insecure. About 1 in 3 of our children are stunted, which means that they do not even if you provide them with the highest quality education, you will not be able to get the same outcome. So this is an emergency, and we need to solve for it. And this is where really figuring out how do you crack this open, how do you optimize it, this is where digital and technology comes in, because across the entire value chain, when you talk about pre-production, you talk about the problems of small farmers, access to credit, this is where you have models in which technology can enable access to effective credit, where you can actually look at farmers, assess their credit worthiness, figure out what sort of credit you can extend, what type of inputs you give them. You can actually assess land quality, figure out what you need to plant, when you need to plant, and how you need to irrigate. And we're missing our friends from Jazz and Telenor here today. I wish they were here, but they tell you about the fact that if you look at the fact that 80% of our population, 85 I think by now, has access to mobile phones, this is a tremendously powerful platform through which you can get to your farmers who are there even on the smaller farms and provide them critical information on what to plant, when, what the weather patterns look like. You move further along on the production side, again, this is also partially climate change. We're looking at extreme water shortages. Pakistan is also poised to become amongst the world's most water insecure nations in the next 10 years. So it is super critical for us to leverage technology to develop effective, efficient, high-value irrigation methods in which we can actually optimize the water sources. What you plant, how you plant, and finally on the post-production side, how do you actually connect buyers to sellers? How do you connect farmers to retailers, retailers to end consumers, so that in an ideal scenario, today I can look on my phone and figure out what type of tomatoes to buy, where those tomatoes were produced, and make sure that the farmer who's actually producing those tomatoes gets more of a share of the price than anyone does. So when we talk about agriculture, we talk about digital, this is not even a scenario in which this is a good to have. This truly is an emergency. We need to figure out how to do this right. We need to figure out how to do this at scale. We have to invest in entrepreneurs who are building up these solutions, because if we don't do that, unfortunately, without the right nutrition, and I started off by saying this, unless we can create food systems that guarantee nutritious, high-quality food to everyone in an affordable, effective way, I don't think we'll be able to meet any of our development goals. So I'm hopeful that we're doing this. There are people who are actually engaged in this, amazing entrepreneurs who are actually pulling out different ways and models of creating it, but it's something that requires urgent action and concerted effort all along.
Thank you very much, Asha. I think you touched this topic quite in detail and very rightfully pointed out on that front. Agriculture being the backbone of our country over here, and we are talking about all these digital transformation journeys. It's a big set of opportunity, and it's not about the opportunity for the people, it's the need of our people as well. Because if we have to grow, and we have to grow on the agriculture that we are talking about, all the points I mentioned by Aisha make absolute sense, and we need to make sure that we make best use out of that and make it part of the digital economy there. Thank you, Aisha. Moving on to Amara. Amara, you have been doing on the backbone system of the banking for quite a long time. Let me go straight on that one and say, in order to be part of that digital economy, what is required to be needed to be changed in the banking system that will make our path to the digital economy on a very fast track pace?
Yes, thank you very much, Saqib. I'll take you a little bit back in time, just for everyone to understand how banking has evolved and, what the future looks like. So I have been in digital transformations for, many, many years, almost 28 years. And one thing which is good about digital transformation is that it keeps going on. I mean, everybody is always transforming. It depends on how, differently you are transforming. But in every decade, there has been, different aspects of transformation which have taken place. So if we look at banking, banking in the last 10 years, has had great strides in terms of digitization. I think the banks which were looking towards enabling their different channels, we were always looking at traditional banks where branch banking was one of the most done thing, and there was digitization going on in branches. But in the last 10 years, what we have seen is that there has been a huge acceleration in terms of moving from branches to the channels for every bank. And if you look at, there are about 64% of the banks globally who are at some stage of digital transformation in their journeys. And all of these banks, who are working on their different transformations, will know that, there is a stage which is right now for them. There's a fork that they have to decide whether they should focus on digital transformation for the back end, like Saqib has mentioned, that should they look at the railroad and the platform, or should they look at the customer primacy? Because as you have seen that many of the platform companies have now taken over the ownership of the customer, and banks are really becoming more of the back-end companies where they need to provide financial services. So what I see for the next 10 years is that there will be very few banks, and I would say that only big banks which will be in both the spaces where they are performing, where they are providing the platform and the rails, and they are doing the engagement and the primacy with the customer. But other banks will mainly become the platform and the rails because there are so many enterprises, so many small and medium businesses and consumers who actually need just the financial payments and all of the different user journeys to be embedded as part of what they are doing. And I think you can see examples very well of recent example of the buy now, pay later use case, which has really taken off, both from, in the payments industry where PayPal introduced this concept of buy now, pay later, and now with Apple Pay and Goldman Sachs. So Goldman Sachs is providing the platform and the rails, and Apple Pay basically owns the customer, which is being able to provide that particular service.
Thank you very much. I think you talked about exactly the point that the changes in the digital transformation journey of the banks is required to be happen now, because all what the world is going on that very front. I still remember in recent times I was shown one photograph which was of a coffee shop, and where some people were just sitting, and they asked me to say, can you judge what is this place? And I said, it's a coffee shop. And they said, no, it's a branch of a bank. And they have built it in this way because this is how the world is moving. It's a moving place. They come over here, the customers come over here. That's how the world is changing around on that very front. So I totally agree with you that this transformation journey is on the back-end system as well as on the front end that we are talking about. Thank you for that one. Asan, moving to you. I mean, you know the best how the online platforms are being run in Pakistan. There has been a great success story overall. I just want to understand that, do you feel, because you touch the complete chain, you are coming from a supply chain, you are going to the end customer, you are touching the banking sector on the back end, you are touching all the parts of the digital economy that we call today. Do you feel they are good enough in Pakistan? And what are the changes that you feel will help you expand the business and the digital economy in Pakistan?
Thank you very much for having me. And I think one of our main focus points has been that despite the fact that digitization is continuing, and we had, obviously some of the advantages from the COVID era, there are issues and concerns that we always have to try to address. So, whether it starts from the front end of the supply chain, where you have your sellers getting educated and understanding what a marketplace is, whether your customers understanding how to shop online, view is, how to ask questions. The idea is that at every touch point, you have to evolve significantly. So, we work very closely actually on every one of those touch points. So a clear example is, we work very closely with TCS, for example, and it's one of our key partners on the logistics side. And both TCS and us have evolved in how we look at logistics and how we have really evolved on the customer behavior. Logistics traditionally has always been an envelope delivery model, right? Where there's no return journey, there's no customer that says, "Ab kal aayega," right? And that entire reverse journey is never needed to be built. And all those evolutions have been a function of time and effort to get us there. There's still obviously a lot of headway, and I would say the three main challenges still remain logistics, digital payments, and customer trust. And on the customer trust side, it's a function of obviously having other marketplaces also emerge, also provide an exceptional customer experience, because when a customer has a poor experience in an industry which is already in its infancy, it's very difficult for them to try it again. So you need to really make sure that whether it's the return journeys, whether it's the refunds, we have to do on every leg of it. For example, if there's a return that's filed, we now, for example, at Daraz, will go pick it up. but we also need to work with the banks to make sure that the refund is actually processed faster. So on every leg, I would say that there's a lot of effort required, but the three fundamental legs that are important, like I said, are digital payments, logistics, and the customer trust. So as long as we can solve the nuances of those three, then we will hopefully be able to expedite the growth.
I think you touched the very, very important point of overall talking about the digital payments, and I think that is one part where we are looking at today. In order to move forward in this digital and IT world, the digital payments are becoming more and more necessary, and that I think the customer experience, I think that is also another key today, because I remember I attended one of the workshops of Emirates, and they told me on that very day that the whole thing starts for our journey when the customer thinks about of buying a ticket and opens our website. They said that's where our customer experience starts. Although our main business is getting one person to another place, from one place to another on the plane, but our customer experience starts from that very point till the point he starts thinking and goes to that point. I think that's what you are referring to as well. Thank you, Hassan, for that one. Asif, coming back to you, you have been part on Pakistan level, you have been part of the Prime Minister team as well, a think tank in terms of the IT side as well. If we have to take the digital economy to the next level, and you talked about the public sector and the private sector also, what are the three things that will you request the chairman of the BOI today, sitting over today, to get it corrected in the ecosystem and in the law today that will help the digital economy to run faster today?
I think, hello. I think it's, there are, of course, we can focus on three things, but to be honest with you, what I believe is that it's not about, we need a lot of things from government in this sector, right? So it's already, we have enough. I think what we really need to focus as an industry to take more risks, and the entrepreneurs, like, and also the business community, like who and who of Pakistan, they start investing into this sector. They start acquiring companies, they start opening up and helping. So industry needs to transform and take the leap of faith, and because there is a lot of opportunity. As far as the government is concerned, I think there are key thing for our industry is infrastructure, whether it's a digital infrastructure, where I think, of course, the telco, from a telco to broadband to voice to anything, and to also the connectivity across, because now, as we know that work from home and remote working, it's natural, right? So freelancers, the way they are growing in this country is phenomenal. So how would they grow if, so digital infrastructure has a lot of room for improvement. And also, in addition, the physical infrastructure, what to showcase when somebody comes and say that I really need to put up my data center, to put up my offshore center, to put up my outsourcing centers. Do you have that physical infrastructure to house 10,000 people? Just as an example, or even 1,000. Where do we showcase that Pakistan has a digital internet cities and knowledge parks and media cities and so on and so forth? Until you show something, nobody can believe it, right? That we are focused on this digital economy and so on and so forth. And the third thing is, in our sector, basically is an HR and the leadership, right? You have been listening and talking about the leadership since morning, and you will hear more about the future leaders. That's the challenge that in this country we need to produce leaders and the people who can own and take the responsibility and take the companies to the next level, whether in the private sector or in the IT sector. So that's, and the development of youth, like saying that, yeah, we can do our exports to X times and Y times in numbers. Where is the talent? What do we need to do? Forget about the past, because we can always criticize. But what we can start today so we can reap the benefit in the future. So HR, training, enablement, where the government can play the vital role, because they have an accessibility, they have platforms, they have universities, They can go back to the universities which are producing computer science people and asking them to produce the relevant people, making sure the quality is better, running the associate diploma programs, shortening the bachelor's in computer science degrees to 3 years versus 4 years, and so on and so forth. There are many things that can be done which can create the ecosystem and the environment where we can say, yeah, we are not just 220 million people, but we have talented people. We know there are 50 million or so, whatever number we can come up with, who knows how to code, who knows how to pick up the phone in the call center operations, and so on and so forth. So look at that way. HR is the key. If we have that, then I'm so confident in today's world, there is a scarcity. We all know that. Talented people and the leaders are in scarcity globally, not in Pakistan, everywhere. So we will get that opportunity to boost our exports, to boost our economy, if we have the right talent. So that's another one. And the last point that I would like to highlight is, we need at a government level is an economic narrative, right? This is really important. Why Pakistan? Everyone from PM to BOI to attract the FDI, to attract the MNCs, to attract the companies from the group to set up and consider Pakistan as an outsourcing destination because we have a cost advantage, we have communication, but there needs to be an economic narrative which everyone owns it and speak to it, because export culture cannot be created without selling. You have to sell your brand, you have to sell your country, you have to sell why us and not everyone else, why countries outside should look at Pakistan. So there needs to be an economic narrative, and a strong branding exercise need to happen, which should be supported by the consulting companies, not just by Pakistan government or industry. So I think once we do all of these things, I think nobody can stop. There is a huge opportunity, and I don't think so. This is one of the industry which really doesn't need any government support. No subsidy required, no government support required. We just need a better infrastructure, ecosystem, law and order, branding, promotion, and I think things will take leapfrog from here. That's what I'm very positive about.
Thank you very much, Asif. I think you touched many different points, but the key points is about we have a lot of human resource, and we need to have talented human resource for us. That's something key, and the brand Pakistan needs to be visible all across. I think as long as we are not able to make that brand Pakistan visible to the people outside the world, then the reach and the exports that we are talking about will not be possible out over there. So let's work on that brand Pakistan demand that we are talking today. Aisha, you touched in your first discussion a little bit about climate. So I will go into detail on that, man. Climate change is one of the key issues on the table today, and the world is talking about. How do you see in Pakistan, knowing the digital economy can help achieving Pakistan's sustainability targets and sustainability vision as well? How do you see where were we standing, and what are we required to do to achieve that sustainability?
So I'm so going to be the doom and gloom lady here after Asif's positive comments. I'll be like, oh my God, it's disastrous. But here's where we are, right? Pakistan is the 5th most vulnerable country in the world to climate change, and I want us to really think about it a bit. We emit less than 0.7% of greenhouse gases that have caused this whole problem. So the world has actually moved, the developed countries have emitted, they have emitted such a level of carbon in the atmosphere that temperatures have gone up beyond the level of sustainability. And Pakistan, where, by the way, geographically positioned so that we are neighbored by India and China, which are the 2nd and 3rd most polluting economies in the world also. What that means is that when the world has a temperature increase of 1%, 1 degree Celsius, ours is 1 degree Celsius, even more than that. And why this is disastrous for us? So again, 2/3 of our population lives in rural areas. And I'll go back to farming. Again, our population, our people are actually involved in farming. We are an agrarian economy. When temperatures go up, What does that mean? I mean, obviously, your existing value chains that are already very low productivity. I already said, because of the fact that we have small farmers, we don't have technology, forget digitization, we're not even mechanized in the farming side, right? So we're really, really behind. But when temperature changes, when water scarcity happens, when actually glaciers stop producing, you then are suffering from another hit to your agriculture sector. So there are two parts of it. One part is obviously in which we say, look, we have to do our part in reducing emissions. Yes, again, we're responsible for less than 1% of global emissions. So of course we will do our part in doing it, and we'll plant the trees and we'll do everything else. But the big emergency right now, the big crisis we have is, again, of our food systems, of our food security. Because of temperature changes, the erratic weather patterns, floods, we've had 3 major floods in the past few years. Every time we have a flood, we lose about $1 billion overall because of those floods. So we're talking about a crisis here where we will not be able to feed our own population. Forget anything more esoteric or deeper than that. And we need to figure out how do we build, and we call this climate resilience, climate adaptation. There's a certain level of temperature change. Again, I keep going. We didn't cause it because, again, we're not industrialized enough to actually cause it. I don't think it was because of our policies, but we're just not there yet. So we didn't cause it, but we are on the receiving end of it. Technology-based solutions are the only way in which we are able to then create sustainable outcomes for our nation and for the most vulnerable, for our fishermen, for our farmers. How do we set in place, again, I refer to modern agriculture technologies in which we use IT models to diagnose weather patterns as they're changing rapidly. We can cascade that information through to farmers. We can have drought-resistant seeds. We can figure out, you know, again, we talked about there's a production side problem, but half our produce we end up wasting anyway because we don't have the right logistics set up in place. We don't have cold storage in place. So in order, and all of this, again, digital models, IT, artificial intelligence, all of these technologies, blockchain models, allow you to solve for what would have been an insurmountable challenge maybe a few decades back. These are some things that are very solvable. And I'm looking at it from the perspective of this is urgent. Climate change is not something around the corner. We've already seen, I mean, we're all Karachiites, we've seen what happens to Karachi when rain patterns change over time. We've seen what happens in the northern areas, there are floods, there are earthquakes. So we need to figure out how do we do our bit to actually insulate the most vulnerable. And Asif, here I'll go back to what you said about putting our narrative out there as well. As a country who is then on the receiving end of so much of this, we need to figure out how do we actually create the right narrative around the fact that we do need to now figure out how to solve for a problem that someone else created, frankly. And at the end of the day, that's where it is. We'll be suffering. We need to take responsibility for it. But it's real. It's facing us right now. It's not decades down the road. It's today. And it's urgent. And digital models are one powerful way for dealing with it, but it's not the only one. I know we have the BOI chair here as well, so I'll say, you know, it takes a concerted effort of making sure that we have the right investment, the right legislation, the right regulatory frameworks in place so that we can actually solve for this together.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Asha. I think that we all know this is the topic in hand. This is the problem in hand. We are not the creators of different, but as she said, we are the sufferers of this one. So it's very important for us to take the action now because this is something that will hit us. It is already hitting us. So it's more about adopting it, accepting it, and taking actions about this one. Let's not delay the actions about that. I've got the time warning, so Amara, coming to you, I think the digital and IT side of the things, we know the talent is out over there. What is the message towards you, to the youth specifically, that if they have to be part of the digital economy, what is the kind of line education they have to follow, because the millennials and everyone, that they could be take that part in the digital economy path that Pakistan is looking at. So what is the message for them?
Yes. Okay, so I think the clear message is that the new youth of today is already in demand, and we can see it by the numbers of freelancers that the whole world is using from Pakistan. But in terms of skill sets, I would say that invest in long-lasting skills, okay? Because technology trends will come and go, and every few years there will be different waves that will come. But long-lasting skills are something that if you invest in, you will be able to switch from job to job. You will be able to become an entrepreneur. You will be able to do many different things which you can. And if I talk about 3 or 4 of the important skills which are being identified as the skills of the future, one of them is user experiences, and I think Asif and Aisha both have talked about that, and also my friend from Daraz, that user experiences are changing radically. And this is not true only for one particular segment, but it's true for every single segment. And now you can see that from out of nowhere, this metaverse has come in, which is going to just explode, the user experiences that, different industries will be able to offer. And we as a country are definitely not ready for it, but this is going to be the new reality, that new things will come and we will not be ready, and therefore we have to invest in the long-lasting skills.
Thank you very much. I think skill development is the key for our youth, no doubt about that one. As in coming to you, the last question on the panel this front, we are talking about robust technologies, we are talking about customer experience. As a user of this technology and providing that to the people of Pakistan, what are the important collaborations that are required in this IT industry to take the digital economy to the next level? One thing is creating themselves, one thing is we collaborate with each other to make that end result that the digital economy and the people are looking for. So what collaborations will help overall the industry in this regard?
Sure. I think one is it starts from a change in mindset that it's not a time to fight for the pie, but it's actually a time to grow the pie. And when you look at, for example, in this last year, we've attracted significant capital in the startups in Pakistan. What we have not seen as much as is strategic joint ventures that also allow the companies that have raised money get the strategic element in it as well. So the collaboration that's also required is for the large corporations. I would love a world in which in 2 years the 22 names you have up there are different 22 names of companies that none of us have potentially ever heard of. And in order to do that, and for those that want to prevent that disruption, they need to sort of start looking at the companies that are emerging, that are disrupting, and not looking at them sort of in the peripheral, but actually looking at them actively and getting involved from not only the financial side, but a strategic element as well. When we look at, for example, the agri-tech space, you have a lot of companies that are raising money and that are doing great work in the agri-tech space, but it's also equally important for the large companies to get involved and facilitate that growth and be that's on the on the side of actually being able to take the more traditional corporations to collaborate with startups. And then within startups, there's naturally, and we talked about this, is because we touch every part of the supply chain, we naturally have to be working with other players to be able to grow. And our mindset is that the more players that can work together, the faster we can grow. And so I think those two elements would sort of help the growth in the industry.
Thank you very much. I think the important part is to increase the pie. The important part is to collaborate and help each other to get to the target results that we are looking for the people. It's not about the competition anymore. It's about providing the right set of services with the right set of tools today. And that's a win-win situation for everybody, because the end customer will get the output and the product that we are looking at. So I thank you very much, the complete panel, for giving all these inputs on the digital economy, and thank you for being on time as well. I think we just finished it exactly on that 0 second that we were mentioning out over there. So Sidra, over to you.
Thank you, ladies. Thank you, gentlemen. May I request my entire panel to stay with us today? What an enlightening conversation. And I was pleasantly surprised when Aisha touched upon the subject of climate and how digital economy, which traditionally, or the way, whenever we respond to the phrase of digital economy, we seldom think about agriculture being a part of it or food security being a part of it, but it's very intrinsic. And I love the optimism that a lot of you shared. And of course, the pie seems to be growing bigger. But is everybody getting an equitable share of the pie is another conversation, which perhaps our next panel is going to be addressing. Ladies and gentlemen, at the World Economic Forum, the Global Competitiveness Index has some alarming figures for us. It says that Pakistan ranks at 73 out of 141 countries on the ability of the active population to possess and use digital skills, which is what the panel was actually reiterating and emphasizing, that the need to build the infrastructure, have the population possess the right kind of digital skills, and indeed, creating an enabling environment for IT exports are perhaps the three pillars for Digital Pakistan. Before we close this session, may I once again take this opportunity of inviting our hosts and organizers up on stage. Please welcome Ms. Anam Akai from the Martin Dow Group, Air Chief Marshal Sohail Aman, who's the Chief Executive Strategic Engagements at Nashal Group, and Ms. Rabia Ahmed, the Director and Chief Operating Officer, Nashal Group, to please join us up on stage. May I request my panel to also step forward and come together. Ladies and gentlemen, may I also take this opportunity to invite Mr. Javed Ghulam Mohammed, the Group Managing Director and CEO of Martin Dow Group, to do the honors and present these books, please. Thank you, sir. May I request you to first present to Mr. Asif Peer, the CEO, MD and member of the board at Systems Limited. Thank you. Next up, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Dr. Aisha K. Khan, Country Director, Pakistan Acumen, and also serving as a board member for Bank Al Falah Limited. Ms. Amara Masood, President and CEO, NDC Tech. Mr. Ehsan Saya, the Managing Director of the Ras.pk. And last but definitely not the least, our Honorable Moderator, Country Managing Director, Pakistan and Afghanistan SAP, Mr. Saqib Ahmad. May I request you all to please step forward for a group photograph as our fourth session, titled as Looking Ahead, Pakistan's Path to a Digital Economy, comes to a close. Thank you, ladies. Thank you, gentlemen, for being here. Ladies and gentlemen, a wise man once said that when you speak, you only repeat what you already know, but when you listen, you tend to learn much more. And it has been a fantastic exercise at the Future Summit, the 5th edition, brought to you by the Martin Dow Group, the Nutshell Group, and of course, our platinum sponsors, Angro Corporation. This has certainly been an exercise to take a peek into what the future looks like in the eyes of the present-day leaders who are definitely creating an enabling environment for the days to come. Now, in the beginning of the day, I mentioned to you how the world is sort of grappling with the phenomena of the Great Resignation. What do we mean by that? As the world came to a close and the hybrid work model became our reality, a number of people have realized that they would like to check out of the disease of busyness, how our days and minutes are filled, but we are not as productive. So now going back, a lot of firms are debating whether they'd like to present their people with the right kind of environment. And both sides of the argument, both sides of the debate are pretty heavyweight. There's some CEOs who believe there can't be no team building, there cannot be any camaraderie, and the teamwork doesn't just come together in case you don't see people. But definitely, working from home, this hybrid model is our reality. So how do we pave the way forward? We have a fantastic panel just to address that. Ladies and gentlemen, in our fifth and final session of day one of the fifth edition of the Future Summit, we are going to close the day with this discussion themed as Reimagining Leadership, Productivity and the Workplace. Just about a decade ago, we started talking about an open plan. No longer did we have offices and closed cabins. We wanted to work together. We wanted to work in an open plan. But now, a lot of us want to work from home. So what does that mean for the future? Let's find out. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a fantastic panel here. May I please request the gentlemen and the delegates to kindly be seated as we are well into our final program. I see a lot of people standing right behind the head table. Distinguished delegates, speakers, may I request you to kindly be seated as we are into our fifth program. Thank you. May I request you all to be seated. Also, if the delegates in the back could also find a seat, we have plenty in the room. And may I once again remind you to continue wearing your protective face masks. Ladies and gentlemen, the next session, the final session for day one, will be moderated by the CEO and the Managing Director of Pakistan Stock Exchange. Please welcome Mr. Farooq Khan. Ladies and gentlemen, a big round of applause. With all due respect, ladies and gentlemen, there's a parallel session happening right behind the head table. May I request you all to please be seated, and if I may invite our next panelist on. Next up, the Managing Director and CEO of Siemens Pakistan. Please welcome Mr. Marcus Eric. Please also put your hands together to welcome the CEO of Infra Zamin Pakistan, Ms. Maheen Rahman. I also see a very familiar face on the panel, and he is someone who I accredit for sort of roping me into the arena of corporate hosting and moderating. I believe it was 20 years of TCS when we had a number and series of programs that were happening, and it was, by the way, my first paycheck as well. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together to welcome the founder and chairman of the TCS Group of Companies, Mr. Khalid Awan. May I also take this opportunity to invite our next panelist. He is also part of the hosting organizing team for the fifth edition of the Future Summit. We're very proud of our partners, the Martin Dow Group. Please put your hands together to welcome the Group Managing Director and CEO of Martin Dow Group, Mr. Javed Ghulam Mohammed. Last but definitely not the least, another very familiar face, the President and the CEO of the Mobilink Microfinance Bank. Please welcome Mr. Ghazanfar Azam. As the workplace changes and our contract, our understanding of what we would want out of our careers. Just 5 years ago, we used to debate about the work-life balance, but now many have concluded that work is a small part of our life in itself. But we'd like it to be passionate, we'd like it to be impactful. So how is this relationship being reimagined? Farooq Saab, over to you.
Now it's on. Thank you, Sidra. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. And I'm glad to see so many people have lasted the day. We are at the last session of a very, very exciting and interesting day. We have covered a great number of very important subjects for the future of Pakistan, from the economy to climate change, power sector, emerging new digital economy, and now to leadership. Everything that has been discussed so far needs leadership for success. And considering the challenges faced by Pakistan, we really need quite exceptional and adaptive leadership to succeed in the 21st century. And we are fortunate that we have many such leaders in Pakistan, and we've heard from many of them today. It was great to hear the Governor of Sindh emphasizing that the government is looking for top quality talent and really the best minds to come together to help solve the challenges faced by Pakistan. Mr. Ali Akai also mentioned the importance of fostering talent and the human touch, while the Air Chief Marshal Sohail Amman exhorted us not to micromanage but instead focus on our golf swing, which is good advice. And Dr. Shamshad highlighted the challenges of climate change and ESG that all leaders have to now be cognizant of. You know, many recent reviews and studies have shown that the role of leaders, particularly corporate leaders, has become increasingly difficult in recent years. The challenges that leaders now have to face, successfully master and navigate have increased and become more complex. Just to name a few, you know, from globalization, accelerating changes in technology and societal norms, dealing with important issues of diversity and ESG, critical need to digitizing your business and the pivot to e-commerce, expectations of young employees, the different skill sets required to lead the new economy companies and startups, and now, as Ghayas also highlighted, how do you lead in a hybrid work environment? All these changes and trends have made the roles and the jobs of CEOs and other corporate leaders extremely complex, and they now require an even greater mastery of multifaceted skill sets than was perhaps required a decade or two ago. And to help us think through and reimagine leadership for the future, we have an outstanding group of panelists with us today. They are all well known, so I will not take up valuable time introducing them. And to start with, I would like to ask all of them to just take a few minutes, maybe between around 3 to 4 minutes, and share their own thoughts on the challenges of leadership in the 21st century. And please share your personal examples and how you have had to change and evolve your leadership styles to succeed. You know, the COVID pandemic has obviously had a big impact, but I would like to focus on longer-term trends and changes that were already in place and will continue, inshallah, the post-pandemic as well. So to start with, let me start with Javed, the Group Managing Director and CEO of Martin Dow. If you could take a few minutes to share your initial thoughts.
Assalamu alaikum, everybody. I think Martin Dow being a pharmaceutical company, and we are engaged in the health sector. So we all have noticed that there recently, especially the COVID situation, there has been a severe crisis in terms of supply chain. And then we are importing like 80% of our raw material coming from like Europe, India and China. And there was a lot of disruption there. And at the same time, the cost of doing business has gone high. And pharmaceutical being a regulated industry, we are not allowed to approach directly to the consumer. And we need to go to the doctors, the medical community who is going to prescribe the products, and the consumers then buy from the pharmacy. So from a marketing point of view, we have to rely on the personal selling. So we have a big workforce in the Martin Dow Group, which is around 2,000 people who are working in the field and visiting doctors and hospitals. And especially during the COVID situation, they were more vulnerable, and then we had to take care of that situation too. So there were a lot of challenges related to what technology we should adopt, how we are going to replace this kind of practice, and how we can maintain and sustain the profitability of the organization, considering the cost of input has gone up. From a leadership point of view, one more thing that I would like to highlight here is that Martin Dow, actually in 2010, we acquired a business of Roche, which is a Swiss company, and 2016 we acquired Merck, which is a German company. So that was a big challenge for us as a leader to align the culture of Martin Dow being a local company, and then we have a workforce coming from a Swiss company, and then a workforce coming from a German company. So aligning that culture was a real challenge. So what we have learned and what we have practiced is one thing is very important, which is the basic of any leadership or a management practice, which is the trust and the communication. So let's say if you communicate well, and if your people believe that what you are saying and actually we are practicing that, and if they can witness that, and gradually you can develop that trust factor, and once it is developed, then it is very easy and it is very comfortable to sell your vision, you sell the direction, and to adopt the new technology to new system, because they will believe you, they will believe the purpose that you are telling them. So I think this is the important factor, that the trust and communication is the most important factor of the leadership that one should be addressing on a regular basis.
Thank you, Javed Sahab. Marcus, how about you? Please share your experiences, both here in Pakistan as well as what Siemens has been doing globally.
Thank you, Farooq Khan. First of all, thank you. Pakistan has welcomed me in a very nice way over the last 18 months. I came in the middle of COVID. I got a new team of 600 spread over all Pakistan, having offices in Lahore and Islamabad, Karachi. And how do you meet and mingle with a team that you are not allowed to meet physically? So having everything starting during COVID and online was a challenge, but I have to say and admit it worked brilliantly. We had a wonderful closing of our fiscal year 21, and the amount of work and interaction we all had online and through what we use MS Teams is beyond what I ever expected. If you ask me 2 years ago, I was seeing WeWork skyrocketing, I was seeing one office desk being shared by 8 people, I was on this kind of track. And now where are we? We are, Siemens has officially announced to have an average of 2 to 3 days per week where everyone is allowed continuously and even after the pandemic to work from at home. So this is our very simple 2-sentence policy on remote work. We carry on with that. We see no detrimental effect, and it worked seamlessly without glitch. If you look at the international stock value, it is higher than in ever before in 175 years of the company. So overall, we mastered well. And what have we now adopted in terms of change of leadership or in leadership style? We have started with a few very interesting new initiatives. First of all, to be agile, to be fast, to be approachable, our real objectives. And how can we learn from each other? Maybe later on I will go deeper, but what we adopted is so-called the leadership circles. Leadership circles is something in my 31 years at Siemens I have not seen before. We go over the whole region and we mix the cards. We mix senior leaders, for example myself, then mid-level leaders with junior leaders. We mix a circle of people who never met physically, maybe even never telephoned before. And there are people in there from Saudi Arabia, working in Egypt, or Egyptian working in the UAE, or Omanis and Qataris and Kuwaitis or Germans or whoever. And we are building a group of 12. That's one circle, for example. And every other leader is in another circle. So we have a multiple of circles right now going on over a whole year. And what do? We do what we could have done many years ago, but we never had the idea to do it this way. We are doing a collective sharing and learning. And you know, if I'm not immediately speaking with my boss, but with somebody who sits 1,000 kilometers away, or in your world, it could be that you form circles in the country where someone in Peshawar speaks with someone in Karachi and who is not directly related to him. That's basically what we have created. What do we do in these leadership circles? We have certain themes. I'll come to that later. But it's an environment of trust. I heard it before. Trust is a key element of a new leadership style. So we allow mid-level junior manager somewhere to speak to a senior leader over far distance, something what in the past you would have called a mentorship. But we do a collective mentorship all at once, the whole region, thousands of people, and we all plotted them in. And surprisingly, and I have never expected that this thing works so well, but we came in these circles to very personal experiences. How did you or he or she experience the COVID crisis? Or other things, and people start to really break up, to get out and tell what they felt and how hard it was on them, their family, their loans, their children, schooling, and so on. And in this circle of trust, we kind of build up each other, because we are in the same company, we're in the same family. It's very relatable, it's very trustable, and it's very supportive to each of the individuals. We also clarify, maybe I stop and hand over to the next, but if we want to come back to this topic, please ask a question, or one of the other members on the panel. That is one part of several others that I might still have a chance to speak to you about. But our approach is a very human leadership style, a very, I heard it before, sapient leadership style when someone spoke about the Harvard Business School, or even you might call it a servant-style leadership approach, where why am I here? Why am I here? I'm here to dictate, to know it all? Not at all. I'm here to serve. I'm here to help. I'm supporting my team. I'm enabling my team. So this kind of approach is spread out over the whole company, and we are trying to get away from a very hierarchical, I know it all approach. That's about in a nutshell, and let's hand over. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. And I will definitely come back with some follow-up questions. Maheen, please share your thoughts, having been from two industrial companies to a services-focused company. Thanks. It's not.
Thank you, Farooq. So InfraZamin is infrastructure finance, and it's a brand new company that was actually born during the COVID pandemic and actually spent the first 3 months of its existence being set up under a work from home situation. So very much a startup kind of culture and environment that we sought to build. And it wasn't until, I think, the first 3 or 4 months into InfraZamin's existence that we actually did have an office space and where all the team could get together in one space. So I think this was a very interesting opportunity for all of us to understand that, yes, new companies can be born under a work from home situation, and they can certainly transition into more mature frameworks once they're ready to do so. So I think that idea in terms of developing hybrid work cultures has certainly thrown out some interesting thoughts from a CEO perspective. First of all your employees don't need to be in the same place, but they do need to be accessible, and developing that team discipline, developing that culture of productivity is very important. And here is where I think communication became key. Whereas before, when you have sort of open plan offices, you could walk into anyone's office and speak to them. In reality, from work from home, as has been mentioned before, there is a huge amount of trust that the employee certainly is focusing on their deliverables and also attempting to do the work that's been assigned in the time frame that's been given. So with that, the communication had to go up tremendously. I think the second thing we also realized is that we have to allow flexibility, because the COVID pandemic is not just about hybrid situations, it's about real situations where families do get unwell, where employees do get sick, and you have to account for all these factors when you are trying to lead. And I think their compassion and empathy certainly go a long way, and I think that's something that's going to be here to stay. I think one of the broad things from our business that we have seen is that the whole landscape of investing has changed. We are investors in infrastructure projects, and we look to provide financing support for infrastructure projects. And what we've noticed in Pakistan is that the entire definition of what constitutes infrastructure has changed. Whereas roads and bridges are still perhaps very important to Pakistan, the digital infrastructure landscape has become even more so. And there we lag behind significantly in terms of our region with regards to the actual fiber and the actual mobile telecom penetration and the reach that there needs to be in Pakistan, both on a fiber to home as well as on a telecom side. So we have seen many more opportunities come to us in the digital space, in the early stage investing in platforms that previously were not considered infrastructure, but because they offer a marketplace, are now actually considered building blocks of that infrastructure environment that needs to be created in Pakistan. And I think you can see that in the broader environment. When you look at the Pakistan Stock Exchange, you look at the PSX index, over a 5-year basis, we probably haven't moved much on an index basis. But you can certainly pick up enough stories within that, or look at individual stocks within that, that have focused on either technology or on services that were value additive during COVID, and those stock prices have certainly moved tremendously. So you are seeing that investment paradigm shift entirely in the Pakistan space as well, and that's something that we will have to contend with as we go forward. I think the last point I'll just make here before I hand over is that the entire idea of how to evaluate a company has also changed. It used to be fairly straightforward. You had a standard revenue top line, you had a certain cost structure, and then you had a bottom line. And from that, you would say, okay, this company is worth X on a shareholder value basis. But I think now, given the kind of changes that COVID has brought, you now have to say, okay, well, how does this company contribute to the community? What are the ESG standards that this company is aspiring to? What are the gender standards that it's looking to do? What are the internal policies as far as the human element of employee management is concerned? So now it's not just about the hard numbers. There's a lot of soft impact that we're trying to see companies create, and more, even within the Pakistan landscape, where these discussions were not had even 2-3 years ago, now they're a regular part of that investing conversation. So I think these are the thoughts that we will take forward in the next 2 or 3 years, and hopefully bring about a good positive change on that front as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Maheen. Khalid, next to you, you've, mashallah, developed one of the best-known brands in Pakistan. So over your journey, what sort of leadership traits have you found to be the most effective? And more importantly, do you think they're changing or they need to change moving ahead into the 21st century?
Thank you very much for having me. Very honored to be part of this panel. I think the sound is okay?
It's working now, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, you referred to me, my own experience, and I think that I have a company which is now an old company, and my customers know the company better than I know myself. So if I was to be allowed, I'll share some thoughts on leadership a little bit from a different angle. And I will attempt to compress, instead of talking about myself, and then later on maybe we can use it as an illustration. I'll try to compress in the next 5 to 7 minutes only about 2,500 years of learning on leadership. And let's see what are the key learnings we can compress, and then apply them to the modern day, today contemporary Pakistan. So 2,500 years ago in China, a book was written called The Art of War by Sun Tzu. And Sun Tzu wrote this treatise, which is used, which has been really a kind of a Bible for later day philosophers. But about the same time, there lived in China another philosopher called Confucius. And Confucius and Sun were both contemporaries. And so Confucius tried to expound most of the thinkings that had been put in The Art of War, the book that he famously wrote. And he wrote it as 450 essays, which are known as the Artifacts of Confucius. So that was 2,500 years ago. The key learning about leadership in those from all those that have been distilled is that the leadership has to comprise of 3 key components. And that is, number 1, you have to have the will. It's very important that any leadership that you take upon, you want to do and accomplish something. Will Then you have to have the knowledge and will and knowledge, and then you have to have the capability, the power and the capability to do it, the skills of doing that job. Now, let me come back now to the modern times. In recent times, a very scholarly work has been written in the past few years by somebody who in the Western world is now one of the contemporary great thinkers of our time, and he's written 3 amazing books. One is The History of Humankind, the Sapiens, and then he wrote Homo Deus, which is the word of the future, and then he wrote 21 Lessons for the 21st Century. Now, the key that he has distilled, and in between 2,500 years and now have really been the 3 major religions of the world which have shaped modern day thinking and a lot of our society and jurisprudence today. This man, a few years ago, put 2 very important, interesting theses. First, he said that we human beings have a capacity to sometimes overlook some some things that are very, very evident, very much there. And we don't see that. And the example he said is that one of the greatest developments in recent times, and by recent times I mean 400 years ago, was the development of the Industrial Revolution that came. Industrial Revolution, at the heart of it was the fact that they harnessed the power of steam. And the steam engine led to industrialization, and that led to the modern day economies and all the global power structure in the society as it exists today. But he says that the heart of it, the steam, the power of steam, was something that human beings were seeing for thousands of years. That if you boil water, you see there's a power, there's the lid or moves. For thousands of years it didn't happen, it didn't occur to them at that time that there was something in it, until it occurred to somebody who used that principle. Okay? And then he says there's another very important thing, that sometimes we have a blind spot. There's some things that are very, very obvious, but we do not see that. And human beings have that blind spot. And in that blind spot, I will give you an example that, let me come to modern day Pakistan, let us go back just a week ago. And I'll quote a few examples from our contemporary life. And I say it, first of all, since it delves a little bit into the political sphere, but it is not in any way meant in it's with all in due respect to the politicians. I think it's a reflection of the society as a whole. Politicians are just part of us. Now, a few days ago, we passed what is called a mini budget. And mini budget became very necessary to meet the government cash flows. And the cash flows, we realized, whatever came out of into the papers, that the government of this 5th largest population center of the world was gasping for $1 billion tranche from the IMF, and for that they had to go through all those processes of legislative changes and everything. Okay. Now, we're gasping for a few $1 billion, say, from IMF. But don't we see that, little do we realize, and for everyone to see, and everybody knows it's a common feature, that just below the surface, in our very country, just the Reykjavik deposits in the Reykjavik mines. And a friend of mine told me, because he served for a while as a minister of natural resources, and he said that is an information I got at that date, that the deposits of the Reykjavik mines is worth trillions of dollars over a period of time. And yet, the wealth that is lying there, and we do not need anybody else to do that, it is something that we humans have a capacity somehow of overlooking. Okay? And then he mentions another, this thing, that one of the very powerful elements in society is the factor of human stupidity. It is one of the most powerful forces in the world today, that human beings, wherever we have made all this progress, we are also in some ways very stupid. And there are many examples that we can take that there are of things that we could have done, but we could not do. Not because, for example, there is that we just heard in a previous panel that Pakistan is under the threat of being one of the most water-deprived countries of the world. Now, we could have built a dam or dams or whatever the solution was in the last 70 years. Had we done that, we would not only have had a water problem addressed, we would have had agricultural productivity, we would have had the benefit of hydel power, which is the cheapest source of electric power, and water management and flood control. We did not do it, and the reason was because we did not have the will to do it. So one of the important ingredients of leadership is you must have a will to do what you want to do, and you must have a great desire and the ability to able to do it. You cannot, a leader of an industrial enterprise cannot say that he doesn't have the right people, or he doesn't, or the workforce is not there. Because what leadership, it is, if the workforce, it's the people that you've got to get the job out of them. That is therefore the demand on the leadership to get the work done, and you can't say, like a bad workman blames his tools, that the people are not there. We have to adapt the leadership skills, therefore, to adopt to those kind of challenges. On that, I hope I've left some thought-provoking ideas, and if there are any questions and answers, thank you.
Thank you, Khalid. Thank you so much. Ghazanfar, again, to another service-based industry, how do you see leadership evolving in your space, and which is so important for Pakistan?
I hope it works. Yeah. Thank you, Farrukh. As Khalid Saab alluded to the concept of leadership, I mean, in his scholarly way, I would like to be simple and mundane in terms of how I view the leadership challenge. This country, mashallah, fifth largest country in the world in terms of population, huge resources, and we have all kinds of problems facing us as going to IMF, as Khalid Saab alluded, and macroeconomy challenges. We have many challenges, but I think three of them are key challenges that we face as a country. One is education. And until and unless a nation is educated, there will be more problems, I mean, in future, if we don't really address this issue, because an educated, talented workforce is need of the hour. If we educate them, they become an asset, and if we don't, they will become not just a liability, but actually a factor of instability in future. The second is healthcare. It's closely associated with, again, education. If education is not there, the provision of healthcare will also be a challenge. So that's about quality of human resources. The third one is the part that I actually am part of a profession that has the responsibility to address it, which is access to finance. That education, healthcare, and finance are the three ingredients of development, in my view, that needs to be addressed properly. And unfortunately, our coverage of these three elements is extremely low compared to the region and the world. In COVID times, and particularly since we already had heard these issues, the challenges actually increased. And what we tried to do was that we are trying to perfect a business model which relies on technology and addresses the question of access to finance in a more effective and expeditious manner than actually the traditional models have worked so far. To be more precise, the formal banking systems in Pakistan so far have only reached to about 30% of savers and less than 10% of borrowers. So the institution that I represent, we have a challenge, headed the challenge of increasing this access to finance in terms of savings from 30% to say at least 50%, and also provide access to finance to those segments of society which are denied access by traditional institutions. So I'm very glad to say that these, despite challenges posed by the COVID, we reached out to about 37 million customers in these challenging times. And I'm sure many of the people sitting here in this audience also might be using Jazz Cash, which is now a well-known and household application, which is used for basic...
If I could interrupt just to ask you, you know, I was talking to SN Sai of Daraz a little while back, and he said that, and yours is also a technology-focused business, that, for example, Daraz, even though it's now a reasonably mature business, they still have to operate with the mindset of a startup, right? So these targets or the work that you need to do in terms of financial inclusion, etc., how do you motivate your people to go into it? What sort of leadership does that require to push them for such ambitious targets? Can you share a little bit about how you are molding the culture and leadership, you know, within your business?
Yeah, the question for myself and for our teams is very simple. That all of us say that we have huge problems that we need to tackle with. So what we can do in our space, so we are in financial services space, so what is it that we can do to actually address it to at least a fairly large extent? So that is a question that if we are making an impact, that means that we are making a contribution. So the whole idea is that at least in the space that we operate, we reach out to the maximum number of people who have never ever been part of the financial system. And as I said, I'm very glad that we have, as of today, 37 million people part of our system, and they have a mobile account. And they use mobile account for all basic financial services, which includes transfer of funds, receiving wages, paying utility bills, and children's fees, etc., etc. We also have now, we started a pilot this year actually during this COVID phenomena of digitally lending to those who want to avail digital financial services. Sure. So during the pilot phase, we have hit 2 million customers who actually borrow from up to rupees 10,000 and from rupees 50 to 10,000. And they repay in a week's time or a couple of weeks' time, and maximum credit is for a month or so, and they keep revolving. And many of these people are small, very small businesses.
Sure.
And so our view is that if we can do 2 million in a pilot phase, then the scalability of the model is obvious. And then we can reach out to the maximum people, I mean, who use mobile phone or something. Okay. And the next phase is actually a credit for merchants, which is again going to be digital.
Great, thank you so much. Mine just on that same way, coming back to you, made the point about that many of the businesses that you're seeing to invest in are new kind of infrastructure businesses, marketplaces. So, and also diversity, ESG is becoming an increasingly important part of investment analysis. So in terms of, again, I'd like us to focus on, you know, the leadership aspects of these changes. So when you're looking at a business, a traditional infrastructure business versus the new economy, marketplace kind of business, what are the different kinds of leaders that you look for that may be successful in these two different...
It's a really interesting question. So our starting point, or the starting point when we're talking about looking at things from an impact focus, is, well, we understand your business, but what is the change that you're hoping to bring through the finance that you're looking to raise? And if that's simply just something that goes to contribute more and more to your bottom line, then that's great for you. but really, are you making a change in the community that you are operating in? And that is the question that we like to see addressed very early on. And if we can filter through those kind of businesses that are seeking to do much more than just profit, but instead are looking to do profit with a purpose, then automatically for us the profit with a purpose, that is a concept that comes straight from the top. It's not a concept that comes through from the rank and file of a company. It is CEO driven and it is board driven. And I think that's the starting point before we even get into the numbers itself. So, and you know, this is not something that Pakistan can afford to shy away from, because I think the question also is, what happens if we don't think about this way of investing? We are operating in a world where for us our challenges are real. We need to increase our exports substantially in order to avoid the kind of IMF issues and the current account issues that we continue to face. Now, the rest of the world is not just looking at you as an exporter, it's looking at you as an exporter who has to operate under a model of sustainability. And that's something that every market now, particularly the ones that we are dependent on, such as the US and Europe, are asking for as a minimum hygiene factor. So if we cannot tailor our businesses to begin thinking about this today and begin implementing
before the businesses, we need the leaders who will think like that.
Exactly. But
so how do we create those leaders? I want to get back to leadership.
I think the market will drive it automatically. If an exporter goes to an external market and they turn around and they say, well, you don't have an ESG program, automatically you're not getting the order. So then the leader needs to go back and the CEO needs to go back and have a think, as in, will he continue in that line of business? And if so, it will be a very narrow market focus. Or can he actually grow by implementing sustainability factors into his business model automatically? So that's something that's already being demanded of companies in the world. I think where the bigger challenge will be is those that don't cater to the rest of the world and those that just cater to the Pakistan market. And there too, I think the questions still stand. We are in a situation where our supply chain pressures are going to automatically increase the cost of doing business over the next 3 to 5 years. That's a given. Because the way the supply chain issues are going globally, it's a global-led phenomenon on inflation, and it's going to hit Pakistan as well. So we can continue to operate on expensive fossil fuels, such as oil, which will go north of, say, $80, $85, $90, or we can begin to look at alternative fuel sources, such as renewable energy, in a much more sustainable way. And so I think the market will eventually take us to the point where if you are a CEO sitting in a local company and you're not interested in the environment or climate or sustainability or worker rights, you will find yourself at an automatic disadvantage from the very basis of your cost structure and the kind of markets that you can sell to. So I think the conversation cannot really be ignored anymore.
No, I agree. And even as Dr. Shamshad touched upon in the opening remarks, even from a capital markets or banks financing perspective, companies that are not starting to focus on ESG and diversity issues, the cost of capital will keep going up. But, you know, to productivity, Javed, I'd just like to ask you, and I was at a discussion group recently where a senior government rep very frankly and honestly said that, look, you know what the power costs are. In your industry, you know what the price increases are going to be. Everything else is known. How do you make yourself productive? One of the headings of our panel is productivity as well. So we operate in Pakistan. We know what the infrastructure shortcomings are. We know our cost of power isn't going down. If anything, it's going to stay regionally uncompetitive. So as a leader in an industrial company, how do you create that productivity that still allows you to be profitable and in fact be regionally competitive? You know, you've also made acquisitions overseas. How do you increase productivity in Pakistan?
I think you're very right. First of all, as I said earlier, pharmaceutical is a regulated market. So unlike the other markets or consumer goods where you're allowed to increase the price depending on the inflation, depending on your cost of production, we are completely regulated by Drug Regulatory Authority of Pakistan, where we are not allowed to increase the price. Now there is a policy where once a year, to the certain extent, you can increase the price, a percentage of the inflation. But overall, supply chain issues, as Maheen is saying, is really critical for us. The utility cost is going up. The overall cost of manufacturing production is going up. So it's a big challenge. And the Pakistan environment, if you see, is a total market size of $3 billion pharmaceutical market size. And there are more than 650 pharmaceutical companies operating in Pakistan. So it's highly fragmented, highly competitive market. I have worked in other markets of the world, particularly the regional market. If I see Philippines or if I see Vietnam, the total market size is $5 billion, 100 million population, and hardly you will find 150 companies maximum. To Pakistan is like $3 billion and then 650 companies fighting for the market share in this competitive environment. So it's, even if your draft will allow to go for the price increase, but your,
so
competitors will not
just to
allow
push
to
you
do
on it, the challenges are known. So how are you within Martin Dow working to increase the productivity to be able to be successful in this challenging environment?
There are two ways of doing it. One is that definitely you need to adopt the technology so that you can be more efficient and more productive. And then and another way of doing it is that you diversify. Because instead of focusing on one market, which is Pakistan market, highly competitive, the world market is $1.25 trillion. And if you look at the regional market like Middle East, North Africa and ASEAN, so what we can do is that instead of putting all the resources in one market, where it is highly competitive and that is highly regulated, we should expand and go to other markets of the world, which is a big potential for the pharmaceutical Pakistan industry. So this is one way, is that you can diversify. Second is, in pharmaceutical and health sector, one is the prescription-driven market. Then there is Ali was talking in the morning about the well-being, because everything is changing because of COVID. Everybody is so sensitive about their health that immune system is very critical. Vitamins are now very critical. People are changing their lifestyle. So getting into the nutraceutical and health supplement market is another good strategy to get in. It's not that competitive, prices are not controlled, and the trend is changing. So one way is to change your business model. Another way is to bring technology to improve the overall cost, overall processes, overall systems. And then you should have a good tie-ups with your service providers, for your vendors and suppliers. Because when we buy the raw material, that we are not here for a month or a year, we are here for long term. So if we can have a strategic tie-up with those companies, and we should look beyond a simple supply and a customer relationship. We should get into joint venture with those companies and to secure the supplies at a much competitive prices. And we have to think out of the box, different models for this.
Thank you. Question back to you, Marcus. One sort of, very, very quickly, just share the leadership circle, the mechanics of it. I mean, how often do you meet? Does it last for years, or is it just a one-off meeting? Just, I think, because it's an interesting thing for people to understand. But after that, something we touched upon yesterday, all of us have grown up with the mantra of being customer-focused, customer-centric. And how are you at Siemens staying safe, working from home, but still, keeping the customer first?
Thank you. Difficult question, but thanks. I hope yeah, it's fine. Thank you for the question. Again, I tried since decades to change my style, to improve myself, and but I think what we all need to breathe in is the multiplier effect. Let's say I perfect myself, but how many other people do I reach, right? And having this concept of circles and creating this in parallel. By the way, we are meeting monthly, and that's the whole year, and probably it continues next year as well. So we have this monthly meeting of the group, and then we scramble the group again, and we continue, and they are engaged every month. And we have exercises to conduct in between. But this is the multiplier effect to the learning, right? And sharing my experience, listening to others, what was their experience in various situations of the business or personal life, or superior subordinate situations, they can gain so much because they trust me. I'm in the same company. I trust them also. They're also in the same company, right? So I have not seen this concept over decades, not in decades. It is above and beyond if I improve myself and perfect myself, because at the same time, this accelerates the learning of all the others. Then what are the main themes in the leadership circle? You touched it already. This is customer focus. How can we think like our customers? What is ultimately helping our customers? How can we predict in what direction they might want to go and then cater the solution for that? So that's one pillar. Or then also our technology need to have a purpose. How does our technology help the society to become better or cleaner or more sustainable? It's a thing we are breathing and thinking about. Then how to empower our people is the third pillar, because if everything comes back to me or my CFO for a decision, we are all but only slow. So by de-escalating the need for approval, by creating an environment of trust and empowering the employees, we increase speed, we increase confidence and growth. So the constant thinking on what else could I shed off that simply lands on my table out of historic reasons, or of course I'll never forget the governance, but there is an arm's length which you can adjust. Yeah. And empowering people is a very, very important element as well, the third pillar. And the fourth pillar is our growth mindset. How can we accelerate our growth? And every one of us has a growth mindset dashboard. I could tip on the laptop or iPad and know how many trainings hours I had this year. Even if I would go to an external seminar, I can get an accreditation for that in the company training hour. And this is part of our quality objective and targets for the company, very measurable. You can show it to every auditor. It does something good for the people. They are learning. And we are increasing the benchmark every year. So we need to have relearning, and we can't rest on what we studied or learned 20, 30 years ago. And that is also a new thing. We challenge everyone in the company, and every leader, every manager, every general manager and director has his benchmark for accelerated learning. And the dashboard of the trainings, he either has to mandatory fulfill or simply to do his hours. Yeah, that's the fourth one. Thank you very much. And
great, thank you. I think, Siddharth, should we open up for questions for a few minutes, so we don't have time?
You can take another question, but we're not opening the floor.
We're not opening the floor. Okay, I think to conclude, we just have a few minutes, and maybe this can be the concluding question which everyone can think about and answer. You know, life for managers and for CEOs used to be quite simple because you focused on shareholder return, and that's all you were really measured for. And now we have stakeholders, and you have to manage ESG stakeholders. How do leaders need to adapt, and how are you yourselves, dealing with that? Do you want to start from that end, and we can just come back? Can I try?
I think everybody has said that in one way or the other. I was fortunate to work with Khalid sir for some time, as Sidra did at TCS. I don't think if we just keep saying that we made this much money this year and we have made more money actually this year than the last year, or we will make more money next year than we did this year, then employees will get motivated. That's not the case. I saw at TCS that people were very proud of the fact that they made a difference in logistics space and then delivery space, where there was no competitor. Nobody was doing as good a job as people in TCS were doing. Likewise, if I tell my people that, look, our revenues will increase by this much this year, so nobody is that excited, even though money matters to everyone. But purpose, I think, is very, very important. That people, in addition to earning money, also want to be serving some positive purpose.
No, but sorry, my question, which I think is important, which for everyone, is that as leaders, as CEOs, it used to be very simple, and it's still hugely controversial. I mean, the American Business Roundtable has said that we are now responsible to stakeholders and not shareholders. Yeah. But there's a huge amount of controversy. In fact, shareholders, institutional shareholders, have come back and said, no, your job is to give the best return to your shareholders, and then we will look after society. It's not your job to look after society. But at the same time, there are other arguments where no, as corporate leaders, our role is to look after stakeholders, which includes society at large. So how are you in your business, and I'd love everyone to just share their personal experience, how are you managing this tension between shareholder return versus, and we'll all have a go at it one by one. So
the first and foremost is obviously if we don't really focus on customers, and we do a good job at that. So first and foremost is we serve our customers better than anybody else. And then, of course, there are other shareholders. That shareholders obviously won't be investing if they don't get a fair return. And employees will not be motivated if only other people are served and employees' interests are not looked at. So I think we have to create a balance. Leaders need to create a balance between what is expected of employees, why they should be doing a exceedingly good effort at whatever the objectives are, and then finally what is in it for them. I mean, why they should. But purpose has to be very well defined.
Okay. Javed, and I think we just have 1 minute or 1.5 minutes each.
So when we talk about the stakeholders here, because not only the shareholders, we are talking about our employees, about our customers, and at the same time we are talking about the society and the regulators as well. So I think what I personally believe and firmly believe in practice in Martindale is that if you keep a balance and then you satisfy your customers and you contribute to the society, if you empower and train your people at the same time, the shareholder return will come in any case. It will get better, it will not get worse.
Okay, good. Khalid?
I think the greatest value of an enterprise is really lies off its balance sheet. It is not really the return, but it is the contribution that it makes to the society as a whole. Starting from its customers, its employees, and everybody that it interacts with. And that is at the heart of what you call the social enterprise. And the value of it is far greater as a platform for the greater good and development of people and the general overall efficiency of the society as a whole.
Thank you.
I think as leaders, we're going to have to start listening a lot more. I think authoritarian types of leadership are pretty much on the way out. As leaders, we have to learn to listen to our customers, our employees, our shareholders, our regulators, and find ways and mechanisms to balance and align all the interests. Because without any one of those stakeholders, the company does not have a role to play or to function in. So we must learn to listen and learn from that listening in terms of what we need to put into action.
Thank you, Mike. Marcus?
Yeah, I agree. As leaders, we have to listen, but also we have to share. And I'm a great promoter of sharing. How did we make it? How did we get through certain situations? And in this sense, I also want to share with everyone who is interested, contact me after the conference through the organizers. Siemens has this degree framework where ESG is a part of it. If that is a struggle for anyone, for any company to implement, just copy with pride, listen to what we have done, how we have done it. Even in Siemens Pakistan, we introduced our ESG radar in September 2021. We are running it for every project that we are offering, and the framework is about decarbonization, ethics, governance, resource efficiency, but also equity and employability. So if that is of interest, I'm willing to share and give you information. Maybe it's easy, adjustable, adaptable, and implementable in your own company. Yeah, I think we leaders, we have to share more often. And with this, I also thank you. Farooq Khan, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Margaret. Thank you, everyone. And thank you. I hope you found something of take-home value out of this session. I certainly learned from each one of the panelists here. So thank you so much. And thank you to the Nutshell team for inviting us here. Thank you.
Thank you, Farooq Saab. A big round of applause for our concluding panel, ladies and gentlemen. And may I request you all to please stay with us before we conclude. And Farooq Saab, if I may just have a go at your last question, only because it was so interesting. When we talk about a plethora and this wide myriad of stakeholders being present, I think I go back to my father's advice. When I was starting media, he would say everyone will have an opinion, but then you will, for every issue, you will need to have that close-knit circle that you can perhaps listen to. Yes, the business at large needs to have a big purposeful impact in mind, but perhaps perhaps for each issue, you need to have the real voice of reason, the ones that you could closely listen to as stakeholders, because otherwise you'll probably have a lot of data, a lot of noise coming your ways, and it would be difficult to navigate your view through. Just my take on that. But ladies and gentlemen, what a brilliant, brilliant panel. We had so much room and so much thought to sort of chew upon. I loved how Marcus emphasized on having a growth mindset and a growth perspective to things. Loved how Maheen emphasized on the profit with a purpose. Just a slight note of disagreement. You mentioned that, you know, we are going to adapt to things and the market forces are going to push us into doing that. That sort of takes it into the realm of being reactive rather than responding or being proactive. And market forces at large have never been that effective, so maybe we need to be a little more proactive in things. Ladies and gentlemen, what a fantastic panel, and I know that you guys are now up with the first day, which was a day of learning, unlearning and relearning for most of us. We will have day 2 as well, but to formally conclude, once again, may I take this opportunity of inviting Dr. Anam Akai from the Martin Dow Group and Air Chief Marshal Sohail Aman Sahab from the Nutshell Group to please join us up on stage. Ladies and gentlemen, big round of applause. And for this round, may I invite Rabia Ahmed, the Director and Chief Operating Officer, Nutshell Group, to please do the honors and give away these books. What a brilliant note it is when we name the book. The book that we are handing out today is Echoes from the Past, while we are looking forward to the future. First up, may I request Rabia to present a book to Marcus Eric, MD and CEO of Siemens Pakistan. Next up, ladies and gentlemen, Maheen Rahman, CEO, Infrazam in Pakistan. Our co-hosts and biggest supporters, ladies and gentlemen, from the Martin Dow Group, the Group Managing Director and CEO, Mr. Javed Ghulam Mohammed. One of the most pioneering, enterprising names with years of experience behind him, ladies and gentlemen, the founder and chairman of the TCS Group of Companies, Mr. Khalid Awan. And last but definitely not the least, aiming for impact from the Mobilink Microfinance Bank, please welcome the President and CEO, Mr. Ghazanfar Azam, eyeing, of course, the fortune at the bottom of the pyramid. And last but definitely not the least, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our moderator for this final panel for day 1, CEO and Managing Director, Pakistan Stock Exchange, Mr. Farooq Khan. May I request you all to please come together for a group photograph. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Fantastic panel, and thank you. With this, day 1 comes to a conclusion. Inshallah, we'll see you tomorrow for day 2 of the Future Summit 2022. This is the 5th edition, brought to you by the Martin Dow Group, the Nutshell Group, and of course sponsored by Engro Corp and a host of other sponsors. For those of us joining us online, we'll see you tomorrow at 9 a.m. on the Nutshell for a Nutshell Group as well as Martin Dow Group Facebook pages as well. Take care of yourself. We'll see you tomorrow.